What's going on, everybody? This is Rick from Studio Spades, and today I want to show a brand new product I've been working on. It's called Falloff Tool. It's a geometry node setup that you can drag in from your asset browser into your own geometry node setups and easily create motion design, fully procedural, without complex node setups or anything. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how it works, give you some examples and use cases of how to use this product, and help you become a better motion designer with this very handy geometry node setup. So let's dive into Blender and I'll show you how it works. So we're in Blender right now, and I'm gonna start with an empty scene and just add a plane to it. I'm gonna edit it and scale it up in edit mode to about 8 times. Don't worry about the exact number, just focus on the info here. And I'm gonna subdivide it a couple of times. And I've also turned on a wireframe display so you can easily see the polygons of this simple plane mesh. So you can do that under the viewport overlays and then selecting the wireframe display here. This product works a tiny bit differently from my other products, especially my geometry nodes products, because this is a node setup. So you'll have to, if you want to modify this plane, for example, you have to add a geometry node setup, and then you can drag in Falloff Tool into your setup. And if you noticed, it'll automatically put these empties in your scene as well. So linear fall of start and linear fall of end. And the end is a child of the start parent. So when you move the start, the end will move with it. So that's why I did that. All right, so let's rename this plane geometry nodes like that, so we can keep things organized, of course. All right, so when you drag in Falloff Tool into your geometry node setup, you get this node setup, and it has a couple of outputs and a couple of inputs that you can tweak to your heart's content. Now, okay, so what does it exactly do? Well, it outputs location, rotation, scale, float, and integers. And it's automatically already attached to this Falloff, and we can fill in the values. So the location or vector values, in this case, rotation, scale, float, integer, we can fill them in here, and basically the Falloffs will blend between those two states. So let's put that into practice. So we can set the position of this plane, for example. So set position, which allows you to put the object in another position. So let's put it on 3 on the z-axis, for example, and you see it slide up, as you can see. And we can gradually modify this with the linear falloff. So that's when you set it to 3 in a set position, but there's no falloff connected to any of this. So let's just put that back to 0. And now we can do the same with the linear falloff tool and have it be influenced by linear falloff. So we have a location or position. Another word can be position, but since Blender uses location here, I wanted to keep it location. But we can basically do the same thing here. So when we set it to 3 on the z-axis in location and then plug the location into the offset, you can see that it puts up the plane by 3, but in a linear fall-off way. So when we move the start, for example, to the left, and you can see it stop here at the start, and it basically will end the influence at the end. See? So it's automatically connected to a fall-off. And when you set the linear fall-off end to -8, this should be the exact edge of this plane, which we scaled up 8 times. And 8 times 2, the default size was 2. 8 times 2 is 16, of course. So that should be the exact end of the influence, as you can see here. So that's basically what it does. Now we can slide this fall off, and you can see it move and be influenced by it. So minimal setups, very easy to use, as you can see. And this unlocks, of course, a lot of motion design possibilities. Let me just pin this window right here so we don't lose it. And in a nutshell, that's basically what it does. It outputs values, vector values, rotation values, scale values, float, integers, and just plug them into your node setups that you build yourself, and then the Falloff will automatically work. So yeah, super easy, super fast to set up. Set it back to 0 and everything zeroes out. We could maybe show another example. So yeah, that's example number 1. Let's delete this. Delete everything here. Clean up the scene so we purge unused node groups as well. Now, if you're enjoying this video so far, don't forget to like, subscribe, maybe share the video or leave a comment. It helps me out with the algorithm, and that allows me to make more videos and products for people like you. And now let's get back to the video and maybe demonstrate another setup. Let's go to the icosphere in this case and maybe add some subdivisions so we have more surface to work with, or more polygons. So again, select your object, add a geometry node setup to this, ico geo nodes, for example. So in this case, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Let's drag in the linear falloff again, and it drags in the puts in the empties in your scene by default. And let's split this mesh. So split, I think split edges is the right node, and this should create separate objects of every face you see here. Then we can scale elements. For example, as you can see, we've scaled down the faces, and if I mute split edges, it scales up the entire object, of course, but with split edges, it splits it all into separate objects and scales those down. Now again, let's put it back to 1, so it's the original size. Like I said, we can input all kinds of data, like float values, and it's automatically connected to the linear falloff. So if we connect a float, for example, we go to the float settings, and by default, the float is set to 0, which means that the size of the faces is 0. That's why it disappeared. So set it to 1 and it should pop back up, but it's being influenced by the spherical falloff, or the linear falloff, of course. So when we move it, now the linear falloff influences the scale, and everything happens between, of course, the endpoint. So the start point and the endpoint. So when we move the endpoint closer, like -2, for example, it creates a more obvious effect. Just move this falloff, boom. So you can do some nice reveal animations, of course, with this setup. Very easy. Took me about a minute to set up, a couple of seconds even. And yeah, that's probably a lot faster than when you have to do everything manually. This node is quite comprehensive. It has some subnodes as well, a lot of subnodes which do all kinds of stuff. Feel free to dive into those to understand how it works, of course. But yeah, I've set up everything for you, and it should be pretty lightweight and easy to use. So in this case, I'm using the float value because the scale accepts a float value, of course. One thing I forgot to mention is that under settings in the linear falloff, there's also a mirror linear falloff option, which makes sure that the endpoint is basically the same as the starting point. So what does that mean? It means that you see nothing right now. Then between the linear falloff start and end, you can see everything scale up, and nearing the end, it'll scale down again. So a linear falloff would go from A to B, and this basically goes from A to B to A. That's what it does. It mirrors the effect between the points. So it could be a nice effect for you to try as well. And there are more settings, of course. So you could, under clamp, for example, invert everything. Really easy. Just a checkbox, and you can invert this effect so it won't disappear but stay visible, and the falloff will make it invisible in between, and then back on the other end it'll become visible again. So super easy, super fast to set up. So that's that for now. Okay, so I want to try something. I'm not sure if it's gonna work because I have not rehearsed this part, but let's do a set position here as well. So the node we used before, so you can put it in another position. And well, yeah, of course, you can plug in everything multiple times. So you can reuse the float value in other settings as well, or the location, in this case, for the set position. That's no problem, of course. So when we put it to 2, for example, it'll be influenced as well. So let's try that. Maybe I want to invert the clamp in this case, so it'll stay visible. That's pretty funny. Let's set it back to the normal linear fall-off and not mirror it. So it'll go from A to B basically, and blend between those states. So yeah, you can do some pretty cool reveal stuff with this. But yeah, that's basically how that works. Now, your eye might have caught the clamp section here. So let me just fold all the other ones and go back to clamp. People that know Exploder Tool might recognize this linear clamp or linear fall-off clamp menu. It basically influences the way this fall-off field, this linear field that is between these points right here, it basically influences the way it works. So by default, the clamp is disabled, so it's a true linear fall-off. But with this menu right here, you can modify it a bit. So we have a stepper, for example. So steps 4 means it'll do the fall off in 4 steps. So let's go back and you can see it 1, 2, 3, 4. If you keep your eye on the, let me just move this out a bit, maybe -6, I don't know. Keep an eye on this set of polygons. It'll, you'll see it do in 4 steps. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what these curve clampers do. They modify the way the linear fall-off works. Now you have all kinds of modifiers, as you can see, or clampers, as I call them. There's an S-curve. So it's basically, makes it a bit more snappy. You can see it move way smoother than the linear fall-off, which is like this, of course. So yeah, totally different. And it can bring some consistency to your motion design as well. So when I, let's say I animate this, let's shorten this to, I don't know, 120 frames. And let's animate the y-axis. So it's a single keyframe and then move it back to a single keyframe. And I make sure that these keyframes are linear. So I press T, when I select them, T, linear. So they're truly linear. You can see the animation is quite linear and, well, to be honest, a bit boring because it's super linear. But when you add a clamp to that, so the whip curve, for example, it becomes a lot more interesting. Maybe I can set it to 60 frames, so it'll be a bit faster. Otherwise, this tutorial is going to be very long. See, quite snappy. And yeah, you don't need to really understand keyframing in this way because it's just a set of linear keyframes. Quite simple. You can mix this effect of the S-curve as well. So right now it's set to 1, set it to 0, and it's truly linear again, as you can see. And when we slide it halfway, it'll be a nice blend, but set it to 1 and it's 100% the S-curve effect. And there are a lot of curves here. Like I said, we have the stepper, so 3 steps can be done as well. We have a bounce, which makes it bounce a bit. Pretty cool. Maybe I'm gonna mute the scale elements because I don't want it to disappear. So I'm gonna mute that one for now. It's way more easier to look at. So yeah, don't need split edges for this as well. Just a set position. So it's just a set position node. Let me just delete these. Just a set position with a Falloff tool. That's it. Set the bounce. So and a linear keyframe. So super easy setup and quite complex motion design if you ask me. And yeah, I mean, if you would do this, if you would build this manually, you'll probably be working on this for a couple of hours, especially if you don't know what you're doing. So that's the beauty of Falloff Tool. It really makes it easy to create these kind of setups. We have other curves as well. So this is a real snappy curve, whip curve, which whips back and forth a bit. Same like the other whip curve, which is more exaggerated. See, so it whips back and forth. You can mix it, of course. Bring back that linear effect a bit. Invert it again. And you can also make your own. So we have a section for 5 user curves here. So user curve 1, for example. And you can edit the user curves by tapping the Falloff tool that you've selected the user curve in, pressing it once and press tab. And then you'll go into the node setup and we have this blue section here. So click once and press tab to edit the user curves in this linear Falloff tool. So press once, press tab, and here we have the 5 curves, and we selected user curve 1, so we need user curve 1 here, and we can basically draw our own shape in here that'll influence the linear keyframes or the linear animation. So yeah, you can draw your own stuff in here, make it as wacky as you want, or maybe not, maybe just something simple, I don't know. But yeah, that's the power of Falloff Tool. You can get really creative. And if you use this user curve on other settings as well, you'll have a very consistent motion design using the exact same animation across multiple values. So you won't have to dive a lot into your keyframes, for example, maybe tweaking those. All you need to do is tweak that one user curve and it'll update across everywhere you've connected it through. But keep in mind that if you add another linear Falloff into that, it won't use that same user curve. If you set your import settings to append, or in this case, follow my preferences, and in my preferences, I've made it sure I set it to append. So something to keep in mind. But yeah, if you copy this node, it'll use user curve 1 that you tweaked all the time. So this one. And we have 5 of those. So you can yeah, really customize your linear animations and yeah, make it your own. Connect it multiple times, maybe copy, paste it a bit. I don't know if that works, probably. That should work, right? Yeah, that should work. So you could try that, of course. All right, so let's delete this icosphere. Again, I'm just going to clean up the scene here. Oh, wait. Now, in this case, I'm not going to clean up the scene, clean up this linear Falloff start and end because they've been animated. So I like that. But let's keep that running and add a Suzanne for this demonstration. So we have a Suzanne monkey head here. And again, that and add a geometry node setup. Suzanne geo nodes, and again we're gonna drag in a linear Falloff into this, but as you might remember, importing it will add a linear Falloff again. So we have a linear Falloff start 0.001 in this case, so I'm gonna delete those because I don't want those, I want the animated ones which I added earlier. So I'm gonna press on the Suzanne and check under objects in this case, and by default the empties that come with this node setup that get imported into the scene show up here, but I just deleted those. So we got to reattach them to the old ones. So I'm going to pick linear Falloff start here, start and end, and put the end in the end. And now this node setup has been connected to these 2 animated empties, and everything should work again. And now I want to try rotation. Okay, so in this case I want to try the rotation output. So for this I'm going to use a set position again. And we're going to set the position, but we're going to rotate the object. But it only inputs vectors, so we need to rotate the vector. So rotate vector, and we need the vector of the object, so that's the position node. So we're going to use a position node as the vector, plug that vector into position. And now you can rotate the object, as you can see. And as you can see, this rotate vector accepts rotation data, which means that we can plug in this rotation node into the rotation and nothing happens because we have not filled in a value on the rotation here, of course. So let's put in 90 and you can see it move. And if you have a very good eyesight, you can see the backside move a bit earlier than the face. That's because, yeah, it's a linear effect, of course. And in the start of the empty here, the linear Falloff start rotates it earlier than the end does, but I want to increase the effect of it, so let's put them closer together. Now it should happen more obvious. Pretty cool. And yeah, feel free to, I don't know, make it a 360 in this case. So we'll do a nice rotation. Pretty cool. And again, this stuff can, of course, be modified with the clamp. So maybe do a steps. I'll do it in 4 steps, which is kind of janky if you ask me, but hey, we're here to experiment. Maybe put the Falloff end a bit further away, -4 maybe. Oh, that's pretty cool. Maybe put in another rotation. I don't know, 360 on the Z-axis. So it looks like a very cartoonish warp, but still pretty fun. Maybe add a little subdivision to that before the setup, of course. So subdivide it twice. No, I don't know. It looks like a cartoony swooshing effect of the face. Pretty fun. Let's go back to the geometry nodes. Maybe zero that out. This is pretty fun. Whip curve 1. What does that do? S curve. Yeah, this is pretty cool. 360 on the x-axis maybe. Whoop. So yeah, I mean, you never really know what you're going to get, but feel free to experiment. And again, maybe use a user curve. So user curve 1 is linear by default. Tap it once, tap to edit, and go into the blue section here. Curve clamper user curves. Tap it once and press tab. And then we're going to modify user curve 1. Maybe do something wacky here. Whoop. So yeah, lots of customizability. You can get some real crazy stuff that way. Let's see what this does. So yeah, pretty cool. -360, what does that do? Pretty cool. Anyway, I wouldn't recommend your geometry protruding itself, of course. So this is just for demonstration purposes. But yeah, you can get really creative with these effects and create some really wacky animations that way. So that's the rotation part of linear Falloff Tool. All right, so now I want to try something different. Maybe delete everything for now and delete the linear Falloff as well. Clean up the scene to keep it organized. And now I want to try the spherical Falloff. We haven't touched on that yet. So let's drag it into the geometry node setup. It'll import a spherical Falloff or an empty by default, and that is referenced here under object, the sphere Falloff, which is this one in the scene. So how can we modify this? Maybe we can do a scale, for example. Oh. Okay, so right now I want to explode the mesh outward. So we're going to need a set position for that. We'll also need the position of the object. So position added and a vector math, which we can use to multiply the position. So plug it in, multiply, and plug that into the position and multiply by 1. We'll basically have your original object back. Multiplying by 0, of course, gets you 0. But if you multiply by 2, everything will be twice as big. So it's kind of the same like scaling up the mesh. But let's put it to, I don't know, 1.2, 1.2, 1.2, which is a tiny bit bigger. And yeah, that looks about right. Okay, so for this, I'm going to use the scale data. So I'm going to hide the location and rotation and go into scale and plug that in. So you just saw it scale down a bit. Now that's because compensate scale has been set to 111, and that's basically just to make sure that you're not hiding your object unnecessarily, because multiplying by 0, of course, creates an invisible object, because multiplying by 0 means 0. You won't see it. The scale is then 0. And the compensate scale basically counters that effect by making sure that the default value is 0, but the spherical Falloff can influence it by this amount, and this amount is 0, 0, 0 as well, the scale. But when you fill something in, like, I don't know, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, it'll scale it up by 0.5. But it is, of course, connected to the spherical Falloff. So when you start moving that around, you can see it get influenced by the spherical Falloff. And if you have very good eyes, you can see it, that it influences it. The influence is stronger nearing the origin point here, the absolute center of this Falloff, but the effect is not dramatic enough. So maybe we can counter that with a clamp again, maybe use the whip curve, and you can see a more snappy effect. Maybe we can increase this effect a bit more dramatically, set it to 2, so the scale will be twice as large when it's near the center of the spherical Falloff. So we get this alien skull effect, basically. But yeah, that's basically how that works. So you can modify the scale with a spherical Falloff as well, and maybe invert it. So once it's near the origin point, it'll scale down to the original size, and when it's away from that, it'll stay twice as big, since scale is 2:2 in this case. So yeah, a lot of options. Again, you can create some inflating effects, for example, like a balloon inflating, or maybe something blowing up and yeah, maybe growing before it finally explodes. You could use this spherical falloff for that. Let's try it with a different curve. That's a really harsh effect, as you can see. Pretty interesting. Let's shade smooth. So yeah, that's how the spherical falloff works. It'll influence your falloff with a spherical form. One thing you also can do is scale up the falloff. So the spherical falloff has been set to 10-10-10. You can scale it up and it'll modify the effect, as you can see. So that's another way to influence the falloff field, make it more smooth or harsher. And remember that the original is 10-10-10. Now another thing you can do is use Falloff Tool to make selections. So we can use a delete geometry node, for example. It will delete all the faces in this case, but we can select which faces. And you can use the integer value for that. Float should work too, but integer makes more sense as it creates selections of whole numbers. And we also need to fill in a value, of course, under float or integer. So I don't know, set it 1, for example, and it'll delete faces. In this case, when they get outside of a certain range of the spherical falloff. Now we've set the clamp to invert, of course, so we can de-invert it and get the normal values. And we can remove the clamp, of course, so disable clamp to get the true linear effect. So yeah, just another way to influence your motion design. You can, of course, plug it into any node that has a selection field, of course. So yeah, you can get really creative and not just use it on a delete geometry node. We can also adjust the falloff influence. So this is basically a range of the effect. So you can subtract or add to the, so you can subtract or add the field of influence, basically is a scaling effect. And in this case it's set to add, but you can set it to multiply, for example, and just creates a different way of influencing this field. Subtract 2, so that's the opposite of add in this case, and divide is the opposite of multiply. Just creates a tiny difference in the way it's being processed, and that's under settings here. So yeah, that's just a different way of influencing that field. By default it's set to add, and add 0. That should be the default range of this spherical falloff field, but feel free to manipulate it in any way you see fit. You can do it by adding to the influence field, or maybe scaling the sphere up like I demonstrated earlier, or up or down, so you can get a yeah, just a different effect. Anyway, let's reset this to 10-10-10, and I want to demonstrate something else. So let's hide this and delete the delete geometry node, because there's something else you can do with all these values that the Falloff tools put out, and that's storing them as attributes, so you can recall them somewhere else. So in this case, we're going to do a store named attribute, and you can store a float value. In this case, you can select anything, but we're going to use a float value for now, and plug in the float. So float goes into the value, and you'll have to give it a name. So let's go with data, which is a name that's easy to remember. And now you can recall this data attribute somewhere else. So, and the data is the float values that are being manipulated by this spherical falloff. So let's, for this demonstration, add a material to the Suzanne and go into cycle so we can see the material, and maybe turn off that wireframe for now. And we're going to go into the shader editor. We're going to recall that data attribute here. So let's add a attribute and name that data. So this is the float value from the spherical fall off now. And we can make this material bright red, for example, and copy paste another one and make it a very obvious blue, which looks like this. And we can blend between those, for example. Now I'm just using very simple materials here for this demonstration, but you can use a rock and moss texture, for example, or material even, and blend those with the spherical fall off. So mix shader allows you to mix those with a float value. And if you plug it in, you will see this purple color because it's set to 0.5 and it mixes blue and red evenly. Slide it to the left is blue, slide to the right is red. But you can also use the data attribute, which we just captured in geometry nodes. So we stored that float value here. Float goes into the value, which value, a float value, and we call it data. And then in the shader editor, we can output that data into the factor. And then boom, you have a spherical fall off, which allows you to blend between those colors. Cool, huh? And we can, of course, clamp these. So let's go back into geometry nodes, go into the clamp section. We can invert it or not, or use a stepper. Let's see what that does. Does it in, obvious steps. Maybe scale down the spherical fall off. Cool. Now imagine doing this with, I don't know, a rock texture and some moss in there, or, I don't know, an emissive material and an opaque material or glass or something. Just combining those two, or maybe even more, could get some really crazy results. Let's see if we can use a whip curve. Nice. So yeah, only takes a couple of seconds to set up. Super easy, super fast, and should definitely help you with your 3D animation or motion design. Another thing we can do is, of course, attach this sphere to maybe a curve. So we can add a curve into the scene. Let's do a simple circle, scale it up a bit, subdivide it, so we have more points to work with. Create a nice shape around this Suzanne. I don't know, something like this, with this cool path. Then select the sphere and then constrain it to follow that path. So follow path, pick the path, make sure you use fixed position, and make sure that the sphere is zeroed out, so it'll follow the exact path. And when you select fixed position, it'll go from 1 to 0. You can basically loop that in your keyframe stuff, so it'll start and end in the exact same position. And maybe we can keyframe that as well. So frame 0, frame 60, boom. Make sure it's linear. Maybe scale down this entire path a bit, and maybe Eevee works a bit faster now. So yeah, that's basically how that works. So you can influence the color or the application of a shader as well with Falloff Tool. And it's super easy to set up, as you can see. This also works with the linear falloff, of course. The exact same method, only the type of falloff is a bit different. It's linear instead of spherical. But you also use the store data or store named attribute, and then recall that attribute in the shader editor with a attribute node, and then plug in the factor into the factor. Super easy. So that's basically everything I have to say about Falloff Tool. So I hope you enjoyed the video. You can get Falloff Tool right now over at Superhive Market. So head on over there quickly to grab it off the store. And this was Rick. Hope to see you in the next video. Take care. See ya.